right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the 5th episode of the Creative Path podcast with my friend Connor Cherland. I'm David Segall, and we're coming to you from Santa Barbara, California, and we wanted to talk a little bit today about creating value as entrepreneurs, artists, musicians, creators, storytellers, and writers in this new paradigm of the current situation, the pandemic, and a health crisis essentially going on in our world. So that was. Am I jumping the gun? Am I jumping into it too much? Okay.
No, that sounds great.
Right into it.
I mean, basically, it's like what is to be done moving forward.
Exactly.
For people who want to, create goodness in the world.
Yeah.
And we typically do it through our art. There's some ways that our art has been stunted in number of public performances we can do, but there's still lots of things moving forward to be done. So
yes. And in conjunction with that, we're going to talk a little bit about redefining our values as people and as artists and as a collective society, understanding that probably a big part of the root cause of what we're going through globally has been from an imbalance in our values, or maybe valuing the wrong things, the things that create shortages or pandemics or famines or whatever it might be. And instead understanding that, really we're here to serve the greater good, and that in giving more from our hearts, no matter who we are, we receive more. That's the way that life works. Abundance works that way. And if we cut that flow of generosity off towards our world, our society, we're cutting it off towards ourselves. So, along those lines, Connor, do you want to start with a little bit about how your world has changed as an artist with what's going on, and how your gigs and performances are changing, and the kind of performances you want to focus on from here forward?
Yeah. I mean, we kind of talked about it a little bit last time, talking about moving to more online gigs, more doing the free house concerts. That's all still going on, probably to a little lesser amount. And I think one of the things that is important for musicians and gig workers at the moment is understanding how to be a little bit more frugal. So I'd love to also, during this time, go into some of the ways that we're being a bit more frugal compared to previous life.
Frugal in the sense of time?
Frugal, I mean, I have more time than I ever have, but I have less money.
Right.
So there's, I still want to pay for a new album. I still need to pay those. The last thing I would want to do is not pay other musicians for helping me with my album.
Right.
So
you want to keep creating.
Yeah, want to keep creating. So, some of the sacrifices I've had to make is thinking about the number of people who can be involved in my projects. The more people, the more you have to pay. And so trying to keep the team really tight-knit and lean. And at the beginning, I thought maybe it'll be this amount. And as I continue to see what my income numbers are, I'm I'm going to need, how do I get the most out of these few people helping me without breaking my bank and putting me into any scary scenario.
Sure. This brings up a really important point, I think, which is basically asking a question of how can we continue creating during very difficult times like this, understanding that staying in the creative process, in the creative zone, and staying actively creative is a very important part of fostering happiness and joy and peace within ourselves and in our community. It has a ripple effect. And I've been watching I've been seeing firsthand how continuing to offer music, in socially spaced out environments and or online has spread so much joy amongst our community.
Totally.
And I'm sure you've gotten the same kind of feedback. People just more than ever before are expressing gratitude for it, saying this is so healing, this is so needed right now, because we're going through, as a society, as a global family, we're going through a dark night. It's a dark night of the soul, but it's really important that we remember that it's darkest before the dawn. I mean, I feel very hopeful about our future as humanity, because I've seen a change is going to come. You know that song? Change has been coming for a long time, and we needed to wake up. I really think we needed a major wake up call.
Right.
Not that I'm happy for the suffering at all that's what's going on, but I do really feel I'm grateful that we are awakening more. And pain does that.
Yeah.
Challenging times do that. It squeezes us out of our comfort zone, and we go, oh my goodness, life is short, life is precious.
Right.
What am I really valuing? Am I valuing money, resources, status, or am I valuing my health, the health of my children, the health of my family, the health of my neighbors, the health of my planet, my ecosystem?
Right.
I always go back by default to indigenous peoples, indigenous cultures, because I've always felt a deep fascination with them and studied them, watched documentary films, and they always have enough, because they live in small, tight-knit community systems. They live with nature. They respect nature. They don't take too much. They don't take more than they need.
Right.
They everything that they do they do with reverence, with gratitude to the spirit of the animals that they hunt, or the plants that they forage. And I see that kind of awareness returning to us as a society, but it only happens on an individual level first, as we understand that, if we take something, we better make sure that we deposit something back, because if we take too much, we deplete the soil, we deplete the resources for our neighbors and our family.
Yeah.
So that's been really key in my awareness lately, is how can I give more?
Yeah.
And how can I take less?
Yeah.
Because less is more, and we really don't need everything that we think we need.
Yeah. No, I think that's did you ever read Uval Noah Harari's book Sapiens? A Brief History of Mankind.
I keep being told to read it, and so that's top of my list.
It's pretty dense. It was.
I'm glad you brought it up, because I know all our listeners and viewers are going to want to read it too.
Well, I got halfway through and was like, I'm going to call it.
Well, they say that on Audible it's a little bit easier, right?
I was reading it on Audible.
Oh, you are? Okay. Even then it's dense. Huh?
So even then it was pretty dense. But one of the things that he talks about is this myth that we are more efficient currently, and like what are the trade-offs for this type of specialization that we've all had in society. And he was talking about the earlier you go in societies, you see people having immense amounts of leisure time.
Yes.
Because the only thing you need to do for that day is get the food for that day.
Exactly.
And I mean, it's
a paradox.
It's a paradox. I mean, you see it in a lot of religions, like give us this day our daily bread, not like give us today our bread for tomorrow. Like, which would be a very different kind of a prayer.
No, absolutely. And I think in spiritual traditions, both of the East and the West, over and over again, you see that theme or principle coming out of, do not take more than you need.
Yeah.
And make sure that your other tribe members, your family members, your community members, your neighbors, make sure that they have enough. Because if they're starving, if they're suffering, then at some level you're going to be suffering too.
Yeah.
So, the well-being of the whole is paramount. It's absolutely paramount.
I would agree. And that goes under the category of give more. And we're also talking about like frugality, which is the concept of take less. Yeah. And
I'm glad that you clarify it that way, because some people think of the word frugal in a negative connotation, like being miserly or cheap.
Sure.
But I
which
think
sometimes it can be.
Which what you mean is being very resourceful and very mindful about how we're using our resources.
Right.
And our time.
Right.
Which is why I'm here talking to you right now, Connor.
Yeah. Yeah, we find conversations with each other valuable. Yeah, one of the ways that I've sort of realized I can, like, I already talked about this, that I can take less by hiring fewer people and like getting the most buy-in and most value out of those like 3-4 people. But I also just like haven't really been eating out.
Right.
And which I know, like,
who really has, right?
I mean, I want a lot
not
of
as
these,
artists.
yeah, I want a lot of these restaurants to survive,
Right.
but based off of like my needs right now, I will need to go out to certain restaurants very sparingly.
Yeah.
As like a very intentional patronage.
Right. Absolutely.
But I've also noticed it with like drinking, or like normally,
right,
like where I would have gone out to a bar. Now I'm like, oh, I kind of want to go to the Bevmo and like get all the bar ingredients and like take the big hit right now.
Yeah.
And then just like have those ingredients for like whenever that mood strikes.
Right.
Which is like, these are very like first world ideas.
First world concepts, challenges. Right.
Yeah. But it is like just overall consuming less and
consuming less and enjoying more. That's something that's come up in my mind lately. I think about that all the time. Consume less and enjoy more. I think there's an art form in that. I also I watched an incredible video on YouTube by a doctor named Zach Bush. I recommend checking out his work. And he's a holistic doctor of internal medicine, and he talks about how pandemics like the one we're experiencing now, and even some of the influenzas of the past 150 years, even something like tuberculosis, he draws a correlation between the Industrial Revolution and the development of large-scale mass monoculture farming,
right?
Whether that's factory farming with animals or monoculture farming of soy and corn and wheat, where these corporations like Monsanto or the other powers that be will literally wipe out probably millions of acres of land that was once an ecosystem, like a marshland or something, and just grow one crop or 3 crops, and they have to use a ridiculous amount of pesticides and chemical fertilizers in order to do that.
Right.
And that's the food that gets put into our restaurant food, definitely our fast food, definitely the mainstream snack food. All of it's full of GMO corn, soy, wheat, you name it.
Right.
So anyways, one of the things that he brings up is that apparently the amount of healthy gut bacteria in our guts now is 1/10 of what it was about 200 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And what that means for those who have studied the importance of gut health and the good bacterial health in the guts, if we don't have enough good bacteria in the guts, our immune system is greatly, greatly impacted. So our chances of contracting something like this COVID or any number of diseases is immensely amplified. So anything we can do to diversify our diet and eat more locally grown, organically grown, sustainably grown, shopping at a farmer's market if there's a local farmer's market, or subscribing to a CSA, community supported agriculture, where these farmers have gotten together and they'll deliver a box of organic produce to your door. You don't have to go out.
Yeah.
And yes, it's more expensive. I know it's more expensive than going to your traditional grocery store, but less is more, and it's really about quality over quantity. As Americans specifically, and let's face it, I mean, most of the people in the Western world, and probably much of the Eastern world, at least in a country like China, I mean, probably there's overconsumption. We're eating too much. We're drinking too much. We could cut back. But we have this unhealthy relationship with food where it's become a drug for many people. I see it all the time. People go to food as a form of escapism, instead of looking at food for what it is, which is sacred life nourishment. It's a sacred substance that keeps us alive, like the air that we breathe and the water that we drink.
Totally.
So redefining our relationship with food, what we put in our body, the nourishment. And, I think to your point, I personally learned to love to cook. It was an acquired taste and skill. I didn't know how to cook until I was probably in my 20s, and it was a trial by error thing. But I eventually learned what all these different, spices are, and the different leafy greens, and how to cook sweet potatoes, and learn to just love the variety. Now I love variety in my diet.
Right.
I feel healthier than I ever was before. And, with that comes greater immunity, greater longevity, greater energy, more music.
And also just a deeper knowledge base.
Yeah.
I think, yes, there are so many good, health reasons for dealing with local farmers markets and, getting locally sourced produce. But there's also just supporting your local economy.
Absolutely.
And
that's so important.
And also you're reducing the amount of middlemen and middle steps. So we use one of those produce boxes. It doesn't get delivered. We pick it up from a school, but it's basically just a randomized box. So it's whatever they have, they send a certain amount. It's in this box, and we pick it up. And the ingredients aren't the same. And I think that's how we try to live our lives, where we try to get certain meals under our belt.
Right.
And then once we have certain meals under our belt, we kind of stick to those meals, and that's it.
Right.
What's cool about, one, you're supporting your local economy. Two, it's locally sourced, so it's organic. It's great. But also it makes you a little bit more flexible in what types of meals that you're going to create.
Yeah.
'Cause even if we just got a big winter squash, and that was one of the things that my wife Lane figured out for this week, was how do I incorporate this thing I have never bought?
Yeah, squash. I have the same way. Squash and those gourds are foreign, and I was what the heck? Yeah. What do you even do with this? But when you learn how to bake it, or you put it in a stew, it's incredibly nourishing, and it's very flavorful.
Right.
Even though we hated it as kids, but now acquired taste, man. Right.
Yeah, maybe someone didn't cook it right when we were kids.
Right. Love you, Mom.
Love you, Mom. So I mean, right now we have the time to spend that extra time learning how to cook.
Yes.
And I think that's just one of the practical things.
Short on money, but long on time.
Short on money, but long on time, which is kind of one of the themes that I'm having to work through, which is another one of the things that I'm doing is I realize I can't play all the gigs that I want to, but I've continued to meet up with musicians and interview them on film. But
I love that. I really love that.
But the goal is to just learn from them.
Yep.
A lot of them are younger than me.
Yeah.
And even then, I'm still able to provide value for people. I'm still able to play to another musician and meet people and share musical intimacy, which is another
and musical inspiration. Man, we inspire each other when we're reflecting. And
I also really just have a competitive streak, so there's a bit of me that likes to see someone better than me in front of me and being right. Okay, you're human. All right, let's do this.
Right. Yeah, totally. You'll get over that eventually. Don't worry.
Maybe. There's a good competitive drive, and then there's there's a bad competitive drive.
Yeah.
Have you watched any of this Michael Jordan documentary?
No.
It's called The Last Dance. It was on ESPN and it finally came out on Netflix. And
isn't that the Michael Jackson one?
Apparently there's something very similar called that too.
The MJs.
Because I just brought this up yesterday, and someone was like, "Oh yeah, I think I've seen that." And I was like, "Yeah, the Michael Jordan." He was like, "No, I haven't seen that."
Yeah.
But there are certain times in Michael Jordan's career where you're his competitive drive is the most incredible thing I've ever seen.
Oh yeah.
And there are other times where you're "Ooh, that's too competitive."
Right. It's a balance, right? Because in sports and teams, without support and collaboration and teamwork, then there's no victory at all. But of course there does have to be that competitive drive, or just call it a drive. I mean, I think But again, it's interesting. I mean, I can only speak for my own journey because I used to be way more competitive than I am.
Right.
Way. And I feel like, I mean, it's a trip. I don't know. Maybe it's only happened in the last year
Sure.
that I finally felt like, you know what? I do more service to myself by getting behind people and getting beneath people and like lifting people up, other artists like yourself, and a lot of female artists in our community. I feel like the female voice wants to be and needs to be amplified and lifted up.
Right.
I think that's a really important part of bringing balance back to our society. But I've just experienced so much goodness from taking that different approach and understanding, like, I'm a creator, you're a creator. We're going to create. We're going to play. We're going to sing. There's always going to be somebody better than us. And you know what? Thank God there is, because then that gives us something to strive for, something to aim for.
Yeah.
Because none of us are perfect.
Right.
And all of us are perfect where we're at. You know what I'm saying? So
Sure.
there's there is no one that's not a work in progress.
Right.
And when we realize that, it's so liberating, because we understand that nothing has to be perfect. We don't have to let our egos be in the driver's seat. We can we need our egos. We need, and drive is part of the ego, I believe, the intellect, mind. We need the ego, but it's also very important that our soul, which I look at as our true loving awareness, is in the driver's seat, not the ego. The ego is like the engine, but the soul is the driver. And if the engine is just running off, it's going to go off a cliff.
Sure.
And that's what happens to a lot of artists, especially, they're if we're led by our ego. However, I appreciate what you said, because to have that, just a little bit of that competitive like fire in you is cool, because then you like, oh, I want to know what you're doing, and like what kind of gigs. But then inevitably it all comes around in a beautiful circle, because we contribute to each other's growth. We even contribute to each other's getting more gigs, because we can't be everywhere at once, and we like each other, and we're like, hey, I can't do it, call Connor.
Right.
So it's so important that we come from that place of love, which you're doing by interviewing those musicians and like giving them a chance to share their gifts.
Yeah.
It's just like doubly inspiring. So
yeah, I mean, it's been great to learn from people. But I mean, when it, like, as I'm thinking about Michael Jordan and like the parts of his drive that make me feel uneasy, it seems like it's okay to have drive until it starts degrading your character.
Yes.
And like there's certain
because
times
there's corruption.
A
person gets corrupted because they have too much of a sense of power, of self-aggrandizement.
Yeah, and I think like rude, like they get rude,
entitled.
So that's an interesting thing that I've been thinking about lately, is like
totally.
Another thing I've been doing, because I mean, again, we have less money but more time at the moment. I've considered this time to be a very like skills building time, and a very introspective time.
Yes.
And this again is like redefining our values.
Yep. Right
now I'm reading a book called The Hero with 1,000 Faces, and it's just about the hero's journey. And the hero's journey has a ton of different points in it. Can
you telepathically just transmit to me all the wisdom from these books, because you are really good at that, and doing that self work and reflection and reading. It's so important. Go ahead. So,
I think it's been really interesting to block out hours in my schedule to ask myself difficult questions, and that I think is one of the things that we can be doing, like, as we're hoping to change the world. Like, of course it starts here.
Right.
And one of those things is really simple. Like, one of the questions was like, what is the 20% of your work that causes 80% of your headache? Like, how can you take less of that?
Right. Right.
Because one of the reasons why we consume more is because we are so drained from these things that we hate, that actually don't serve us.
Yeah, that's true.
And learning how to eliminate those things in the first place,
so
that you can live more simply.
So liberating.
But part of another one of those hard questions is from the hero's journey, which is there's the call to adventure. So you're just a character, and all of a sudden something is shown to you, and all of a sudden you have this idea, and you're like, oh wow, like I could do this thing.
Right.
There's the refusal of adventure. There's like the refusing the call.
Right.
Sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't, depending on the story.
Yeah.
And then there's the divine intervention. That's what typically comes next. And I've been, like, one of the questions I have to answer for myself is, in what ways have I refused the call? What is the call?
Yeah.
Or calls.
Yeah.
There's a lot of calls. In what ways have I missed divine intervention?
Yes.
In the past?
Yes.
How would it serve me better if I notice it now?
Such a good question.
Yeah, so like thinking about it, not everything has to be happening in the present. Let's think about like what have been some calls to adventure, what have been some that I've refused, and how has that affected my life? How do I want to keep living my life in the future?
Yeah.
What are new ways of thinking that I can have about adventure and about uncertainty? I mean, right now we're living through what they call history, which is the bad part of time.
Right.
Which other people also call adventure.
Right.
There are times of great uncertainty, peril.
Yeah.
These are what stories are made of.
That's what songs are made out of too.
Yes.
Yeah. My best, always the songs come out most quickly and just effortlessly when there's some kind of heartbreak or some kind of crack in the system that's like, So
Jerry Seinfeld says that pain is information entering the body very quickly.
Yeah.
And
that's good.
I think pain especially, it clarifies a lot of things. I have written terrible songs since quarantine started.
Yeah.
My typical ratio is like 1 in 5 is good.
Yeah.
I feel like quarantine has been like 1 in 8.
Let us be the judge of that, Connor. Yeah.
You'll never hear them. They're just literal feelings all the time. So I think
well, that again, I want to go down that rabbit hole a little bit more with you about the call to action, the call to adventure, what that looks like, what that feels like. And it brings to mind, when you were saying it, it brought to mind, I was going back in my memory Rolodex of times when that's come up in my life and I said yes, and other times when it came up and I said no, and I kind of stayed in comfort zone and then ended up paying a much bigger price than I would have if I just would have stepped into the unknown.
Yeah.
Because whenever we feel a call, a pull, or a push out of the comfort zone and into the unknown, in my experience, we can only draw from our personal experiences. In my experience, it's always been of such incredible growth value as a person, as an artist, a creator, a human being.
Right.
You know, an example is, I think in 2013, I was playing a lot of music with this percussionist who's, he's probably 8 or 9 years younger than me. His name is Miguelito.
Okay.
Many of you probably know him. Great percussionist based in Santa Barbara. And, at that time, oh God, I'm trying to think. He must have been like 18 or 19.
Yeah.
And he's like, man, let's we'd been playing a lot of gigs around Santa Barbara and stuff. And he goes, let's do a little California tour. Let's take like 2 weeks and go play. I know a lot of people up in San Francisco and this and that.
Yeah.
And at that time, I was still gigging quite a bit in Santa Barbara, but I wasn't as established as I am now. So I didn't have like, gigs stacked upon gigs like I did a few years after that. And so I could justify in my mind, okay, you know what? I can give up a few, several hundred paying dollar gigs in order to go on this adventure. I'll do it, and I did. And we went and we played, we played in Santa Cruz in the Bay Area, and we played these house concerts, and we met all these new people, and we didn't make any money really. We paid for the trip.
Yeah.
But we made contacts with incredible people. I met this guy who was on the board of the Grammys, and
cool.
and it just songs came out of it, music came out of it.
Right.
When we step into the unknown, when we go on adventure, creativity happens. And when we're creating, we're happier.
Right.
And when we're happier, we're contributing to the happiness and well-being of others.
Yeah.
It's a universal cosmic principle. As woo-woo as it sounds, people, it's true. Trust me. No, but anyways, so that
the word woo-woo more.
Yeah. Well, one of my friends loves to call me woo-woo, so I say, all right, you son of a gun.
I respect it.
Yeah. So, anyways, that's just an example. I mean, I don't know. I probably missed out on, $800 worth of gigs by taking those 2 weeks off at the time, or maybe $1,000. I don't know. But every now and then we got to do that. We got to step out of the comfort zone. And I think, you were asking me about this earlier, about something along the lines of, what kind of gigs do you want to do now? What kind of shows do you want to create in this new paradigm that we're living in now?
Right.
And this topic plays into that, because I'm sure you can relate to this. There was a time, it probably started about 5 years ago, and I was playing so many wineries and so many breweries, and I was getting a little depressed, because a lot of times these places, especially some of the breweries, I love breweries, but people are there and they're rowdy and they're talking and they're playing they're playing Jenga, and it's collapsing while you're singing this heartfelt song, and it just feels so, it feels unfulfilling as an artist or a storyteller that we are, when you're sharing your heart and your soul with people who are just drinking beer and playing board games. It feels so much more mutually gratifying when we're sharing music and stories and wisdom and our personal truths in an environment where we're there to interact with each other. We're there to engage the audience, and the audience is there to engage us. Right. And we're listening to each other. And it's not just, we're not just being background music to somebody's party, so to speak. Right. Not that I love celebrations. Right. But what are we celebrating? How are we celebrating? Yeah. And so one of the things that I really love about this new reality that we're living in is that, because most of those traditional gigs, let's be honest, 99% of them gone. Right. Wineries, breweries, restaurants can't have music right now, at least in our town. Yeah. So what do we do? And you and I have been offering house concerts to some of our friends and community, socially distanced, outdoors. Right. I'll tell you, Connor, for years before this happened, I thought, man, I really want to play more shows outside, because A, we can be in the sun, we can be in the elements, the fresh air. B, children can be present, young adults, teenagers that aren't going to be in a bar setting or a winery setting. Right. There's something so important and beautiful about having young people present, because they are in the creative zone. Their imaginations have not been squandered or cut off. We can play with them. We remember what it's like to be a kid, and our inner child comes out. Yeah. So important in building community, fostering well-being in our community. So I started, I was inspired by you when you started offering those free house concerts. I put out the word to some friends of mine about, offering house concerts too, but the response in my circle was like, oh, we're not quite ready for that or whatever. Sure, yeah. I think you go with a hipper, more adventurous crowd. My crowd was it was a lot of families and stuff. I get it, So I said, you know what? I'm gonna just offer some music outdoors. I'm not calling it a concert. Yeah. I'm going to call it a sound healing. Yeah. And let's do it outdoors. Let's do it at the beach. Let's do it at the park. Yeah. Let's do it on the mountaintop. Took my battery-powered amp, and I just put out the word. And people got nothing else going on. They're like, hell yeah, we'll come. Let's do a little dance. Let's do a little drum circle. Yeah. Let's do it safely. Yeah. And, Connor, it's like a dream. It's like a vision come true. And, we're not making $1 million doing it, but who cares? Yeah. We're creating value in our lives and in the lives of others. We're creating community. We're fostering community. And with that comes communion, coming together for a power greater than our individual egos. Right. You can call that love. You can call that community. You can call it music. You can call it self-expression. That's greater than any sum of the parts. Yeah. So that's been very liberating for me, and I feel very grateful to it. And you know what? It takes a little bit more work in the sense that we got to think about, okay, I got to be really intentional about, like, what do I want to offer with music or with storytelling? Right. and I have to find a space to do it outside where it's safe. I gotta put out a love donation jar and remind people that, hey, I'm coming out here just out of love, but if you feel inspired to give back, here's how you can do it.
Yeah.
But just keeping the creative wheels spinning for us and for people in our community, and how that becomes a symbiotic give and take kind of dance.
Yeah. I have some practical questions for you.
Okay.
One of them is, there's going to be a bunch of people, like I know a lot of musicians who have had to move home during this time in order to save money on rent so that they can continue their art.
Yep.
It's been a while since I've asked where you're living.
Thankfully, I was living at home before the pandemic happened, so I was able to save a little money.
Awesome. Are you still living with, who are you living with right now?
I'm actually doing the van life. I bought a camper van, and I am loving it because one of the things.
This van right here?
The van is here.
Okay,
yeah.
that one. Okay.
Yeah. I took out the back seats. I put a comfortable twin bed in it.
Is that a different van, or is this the one you've had for a while?
This is a different van, actually.
Okay, I thought so.
Yeah,
Your other one was white.
Other one was white.
Okay.
Yeah.
You sold that?
I sold that.
Nice.
Because I bought that van when it was it was like 2 years old, and
right.
I was making a lot more money. Gigs were coming in, and it was it was like a $16,000 van. I was like, I can justify buying that.
Right.
And then when this all hit, I thought, you know what? If I can get 13 or 14 grand out of that, what I originally put into it, I think I ought to do that and buy something a few years older, half the value, and save that $7 grand that I can get out of it and put that into the next album, because I want to keep creating. I don't want to have my creative chutzpah in a vehicle.
Right.
So, but anyways, I actually bought the first van before the pandemic happened. I'd been living on a sailboat for 6 years.
Right.
Living a really charmed life, my friends would say, in many ways, and it was true. I got really comfortable. I was like, man, I will never leave the harbor. I love being on a boat.
Yeah.
It was fun, but a series of events happened that made me realize I'm too comfortable. Time to throw off the dock lines and leave the safety of the harbor if I am going to be inspired,
right,
and to be of inspiration to other people. So part of the reason why I bought a van after I sold the boat was that I said, I've got to get in the habit of traveling more.
Yeah.
Because I want to take music to other communities around California, at least California. There's so much between Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo, San Diego, Santa Cruz, San Francisco, you name it, Orange County. There's just so many people that we know, and friends and family, places where we can go and offer music in a more intimate way, like with the house concerts,
right,
or in a ceremonious setting, doing a sound healing or a sing-along, a song circle, encouraging other people to sing. Super important,
right,
super powerful.
Yeah.
So that's why I bought a van.
Cool.
And, thankfully, I'm very fortunate to have amazing friends in Santa Barbara who have offered me their homes to stay in when they're traveling, or even when they're not traveling, say, hey, come and stay with me for a few days.
Sure.
Let's do some cooking together. It's interesting because in these difficult times, you talked about it a little bit about supporting local agriculture. It ties into a bigger picture, which is that it's so crucial now that we really come together as localized communities and support each other. Because a great example is with the local agriculture. Yes, it costs more money to buy from local farmers than it does to go to buy the national brands or whatever. But guess what? We're investing in our own health and safety when we do that, because when the shite hits the fan, like what's happened,
you're going to want food in
food
your
chains
area.
Get cut off. And you know what? Guess what? No longer are they going to be shipping food from across the world, because guess what? The trains aren't running, the planes aren't flying, the ships aren't coming.
Yeah.
So in times of crisis, and guess what? This is the tip of the iceberg. And I'm not saying that I'm not saying that to be, I'm not a pessimist at all.
Yeah.
But I do feel like a realist in the sense that, we're going to have to reap the consequences of what we've sown by doing this, sourcing from the other side of the country because it's way cheaper.
Right.
And we pay a major price for that when we starve local economy, because if we can foster and support local economy, whether that's artisan, crafts and goods, services, especially agriculture, what happens is that if and when our external resources get cut off, we will be able to survive and help one another out because we've invested in local agriculture. There are thriving farmers that can provide food for our local economies, our local societies. In a similar way, what I was talking to you about, what we were just talking about, is that so important right now to really reach out to our friends, our family, extended family, see how we can be of service, check in with each other. How can I help you? How can I be of service right now? Because we create a web, we create a network, a safety web where we hold each other in a safe space. We make sure that everybody's accounted for. So important. So I have stepped into this zone of trusting, which is stepping into the unknown. I don't always know where I'm going to sleep on a particular night, or where I'm going to eat, or or maybe I'm just going to eat healthy snacks out of my van.
Sure, yeah.
But you know what? I own it, and I feel more blessed. I honestly feel more rich than I ever have in my life, because I trust in the creative power of the universe. It's the same power that created us. It has that has the power to heal us, and it has the power to sustain us. What you said about give us this day our daily bread. Yeah. I believe in that. I really believe in that, and it's never ever failed me. And it's a nice to have. It's wise to have a little bit of money in the bank. It's wise to have a little healthy food stored in bulk in your house. But don't go over the top. Yeah, because we create shortages when we hoard.
Right. Do you? I mean, one of the things we've talked about is like fear of poverty and like feeling that, or like the fear of judgment. Do you with living in a car, do you have any like practical like advice, fears, or just like general know-how that you'd like to share? Because I'm sure like probably a lot of people could get a lot of could just get a lot of run for their money. Like you sold a vehicle, and bought another vehicle with equal space, are living in it, and are going to be able to finance this next part of your art with the extra profits. Granted, it's not like you're flipping these vehicles and like making money through vehicles. All that money is money you worked for previously. But it seems like a very viable option for people.
Well, I'm seeing a lot of people doing this now. I'm seeing a lot of people living out of, Sprinter vans and things like that, and
do you like park at a friend's house every night, or is there like public lots?
So I will generally, a lot of times I'll go up into the mountains and I'll sleep near a creek. Okay. I love the sound of nature and the crickets at night. I sleep more deeply than I did when I was living in a home. Yeah. And I do believe there's something to be said, again, it sounds very woo-woo, but I believe there's something to be said for like how some of these EMFs from Wi-Fi and things like that can affect our sleep and our natural biorhythms. So I found that I sleep so much more soundly in nature, and this is a period of my life of reconnecting with nature in a really deep and profound way. Yeah. I think it's a very important part of healing for me and for all of us. So I'll do that a lot of times. And then during the day, I'll come down and I'll park by the beach, do my yoga down there, make my phone calls, send my emails. But it's interesting, Connor, because
do you do your emails all on your phone?
I do, yeah.
Wow,
I generally do. I have not really used my laptop very much lately. I am technologically quite, I don't want to say, I'm kind of negligent. Okay. And you're really good about, this. We're going to hang out a little bit more because I probably need to be on my computer a little bit more. I know that sounds oxymoronic. Most people need to be on the computers less. but I do love to record music and edit film and stuff like that. So I haven't been doing any of that lately. I've just been offering music and kind of being in nature and writing in nature. But one thing about myself is I'm living the van life by choice.
Right.
I could rent an apartment, or I could buy another sailboat.
Right.
But I don't want to do that because I wanted my resources to be in liquid form, because I want to be more fluid. I want to be able to travel. I want to be able to create.
Right.
I want to be able to move towards opportunities.
Yeah.
So the reason why I felt confident trying out the van life is, I know it's not going to last forever. It's a moment in time.
Right.
This too shall pass. So I didn't feel like, oh my God, I'm homeless. Like I'm downgrading or whatever. And I don't think there's any shame.
Yeah.
There should be no shame in being quote unquote homeless.
Yeah.
Because or houseless. It really should be houseless, because a home is a home is a home.
Yeah.
I mean the stars, sleeping under the stars can be a home.
Yeah.
So but I'm a minimalist, and I've always fancied myself a minimalist. For me, less is more, and I've had to learn to be a minimalist and to give up. And I still have a lot of work to do with that. I still have a lot of purging to do of things I don't need.
Right.
I've gotten rid of a lot of stuff. I've sold a lot of things. I've given things away. I have more to give away. We all do. And so I challenged myself to live this van life. It was a challenge to me to really simplify my life. So that is one of the biggest pieces of advice I can give to people who want more freedom, who want a greater sense of mobility and fluidity to live in the flow.
Yeah.
Is downsize.
Yeah.
Downsize, lower your overhead costs, get really mindful about how you're spending your resources, take inventory of what do you really need, what do you really don't need, because what we don't need that we're still holding on to slows us down. It creates blockages creatively.
Yeah.
And so that's the biggest thing. And also, the other thing I really love about it is what I was just speaking to, is that it's inspired me and almost forced me to spend more time in nature.
Yeah.
Drive up and stay on the mountain, sleep under the stars, go by the riverside, sleep to the sound of the ocean.
Right.
There is something so healing about that, and inspiring.
Yeah.
And inspiring.
Man, I think this is one of your strengths that you probably don't talk about enough, which is...
Oh, I talk about it a lot. No, I'm just kidding.
I don't think
I just feel like I've been talking too much right now. No, I'm just kidding.
I think one of your strengths is like being able to see beauty and being able to, like, some people see it as like making sacrifices for art, but you see it as gain, and that's one of the things that, I mean, again, like, people who can see, like, because it is gain. Like, what a lot of people want to do right now, or the people are saying in their heads, I wish I had more gigs so that I would have more, I'll do it vertically, I wish I had more gigs so that I could make more money, so that I could put out an album, so that I could find validation, or like, so that let's stop.
Or in everyday layman terms, I wish I had more work, or I wish I had a job, so or I had my old job so that I could have this money. And
and for you, it's like you're a great counterexample of like, well, you could sell all your belongings and live in a van and really enjoy your life and have enough extra money for the art that you want to make.
Right.
That's like you're living out one of the actual like options, and you do enjoy it. Right. And it is just for a time.
And it's very temporary, because I just one thing I wanted to speak to real quick, that what you shared just reminded me of, is that for me the ultimate goal is, and part of what I'm like kind of putting my feelers out to the universe about, is I want to live in community. I want to live on land.
Right.
And I want to live on land where we grow things. We grow our own food. I feel at my heart, I'm a farmer. I'm a cultivator.
Sure.
I love working with the earth and getting my hands in the soil and being around animals. I love that. and being around other people, but in the right kind of setting and right community. And so, and I've talked to a lot of friends that are in the same boat.
Mm-hmm.
They're in the same van, and they're keeping their eyes out for land that we can pull our resources together and get. And I'm not talking about big community, but like small group of maybe 10 to 20 people, and where it's feasible that we could take care of land or afford something, and create a safety net. Yeah. So that if we're traveling and we're playing gigs across the country, we can come back and we know our belongings are going to be okay, and plants are going to be watered, and the pets are going to be, animals are going to be fed, and all that stuff.
Right.
But I appreciate you bringing that up about sacrifice, because in my experience, anything really worth doing, with any meaning, any value, requires a certain level of sacrifice.
Yeah.
And the paradox is what you were saying, that in that sacrifice, we receive so much more than we're supposedly giving up. I mean, it's so funny. When you realize that, you will laugh. You will have a laughing fit, like the Buddha laugh of realization, like, oh, what was I holding on to for so long? I was gripping so tightly. For what?
There's a book I read called The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield.
I read that one. Thankfully, thank God, finally a book that I've read.
But one of my problems with it was that everything was war for that guy. It was like everything is like drudgery, and I like get up in the morning and I pray this prayer, and then I beat my head against a wall until I've written 3 pages, and then I'm done. And then and I'm like, I've done that.
Yeah.
But like what you're saying, which is just like, you could experience it and you could laugh along the way.
Yes.
Like along the whole, like what if?
Consider it a dance sometimes.
Yeah.
Or a divine game. Like it's a play. It's a play. It's a movie.
Yeah. And on this hero's journey, what if it was easy? Like as you continue to like make these sacrifices, and sacrifices are like, that's an internal thing that we often do, but it's also external. Like we give up certain rights to certain objects.
There can be a pain in sacrifice, a pain that goes along with it, but after the pain is past, there's a freedom that comes.
Yeah. And I think that was one of the things that I saw lacking in that book, was this feeling of freedom that you're expressing, which is like, I have a lot.
Right.
In this time, I have a lot. So much so that I can be generous and live generously.
Yes.
And
part of that generosity is what you're doing, and what a lot of artists are doing right now, which is offering more music and art and storytelling in an unconventional way, where it's not, it's at no set cost to them. But if you feel inspired to give, here's how you can give back. Here's how you can show your appreciation.
Right. Having already given fully.
Exactly.
I mean, I feel like that might be a good way to end this one. But just saying, like, give generously and always open the door for like reciprocity.
Absolutely.
But I guess moving forward, like the game plan for me and you is to give generously.
That's right.
And
to give intentionally.
Yeah.
Being really intentional about how we're giving our time, because we're giving our time and we're giving our energy. Mm-hmm. And if we can do that, if we can meditate upon how we're doing that in the way that nourishes our soul in the greatest way, which of course conversely is most nourishing to the souls of the people in our community, the audience members, the listeners, the viewers, we are creating wealth and abundance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think the intentional part has to do with the like concentric circles of we are going to be the most generous to our immediate communities.
Yeah.
We're going, and then like as we have extra generosity, it'll bleed out. But like really honing in on like, this is our community, this is where we are, these are our people.
Yes.
We give generously to these people.
Aho. And along those lines.
Aho.
That's something we say. I've been sitting in a lot of healing ceremonies lately, medicine ceremonies, offering music with them.
Yeah.
And I guess it's an indigenous word that means basically like amen, like in agreement, and so it is.
Okay.
And so it is. Along those lines, when Connor and I first got together to make this Creative Path podcast, we said we were going to do 5 episodes. And this is the 5th episode, and we were talking about maybe today we conclude it. But I suggest, let's make 10 episodes. Let's do 5 more, because this is so rewarding to me.
Yeah.
I know it's rewarding to you, just to get here, just to get together and exchange this knowledge and information and experience, and to share it with you, the listeners and viewers who are tuning into this. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being present with us. We hope you find this of value. May you share it with anyone that you think would be uplifted and encouraged and inspired by it. And thank you for being here.
Aho.
Aho. That's a wrap.